What's the most amount of money you've ever made in a single year as a Wall Street broker?
50 million?
What's the most amount of money you've ever made in a single year?
It's a great question. Maybe about 20 million.
What's the most amount of money you've ever made in a single year?
Going back to those years, I would make $300,000 or $400,000 a year.
What's the most amount that you've ever sold a yacht for?
Actually, the highest price of yacht that I personally sold was over $100 million.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're at the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show, and we're gonna be asking super yacht owners what they do for a living. Let's get into the video. If you could go back to when you were 20 years old and give yourself any piece of advice, what advice would you give?
Taking all my extra income and instead of wasting it, I would have put it into Apple stock and maybe bought some Manhattan real estate.
Good advice. What industry did you ultimately pursue a career in?
Wall Street, stocks and bonds, currencies. Well, I'm retired now, but I was a Wall Street broker.
Wow, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And what's the most amount of money you've ever made in a single year as a Wall Street broker?
50 million?
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's gonna break the bank.
If you could go back to when you were 18 years old and give yourself any piece of advice, what advice would you give?
Don't spend too much time chasing the women. Spend more time working on building the business, and then the women will be chasing you later.
And what industry did you ultimately pursue a career in?
I'm a successful financial advisor. I've been working as a financial advisor for 30 years, and I built up a big practice.
How did you get started in that industry?
Grinding every day, not leaving, putting in 10 to 12 hours every single day. If I left before 10 hours, I felt guilty.
Would you have any advice for people looking to get started in the same industry as you?
Keep your head on a puck, keep your eyes on the ball. More importantly, it's not a 9-to-5 job. If it's a career, you put your whole 100% into it, not just 9 to 5. You work until the job is done and never leave at 5, ever. The man who leaves before 5 has either made it or never will.
If you could go back to when you were 18 years old and give yourself any piece of advice, what advice would you give?
Well, when I was 18, I would just say continue to stay the course and don't deviate. That was, because a lot of times you're so fired up, we don't know really what we should be fired up about. We don't really normally have the guidance that we need. So you want people that have the guidance. You want mentorship.
And what industry did you ultimately pursue a career in?
In finance.
What's the most amount of money you've ever made in a single year?
It's a great question, you know what I mean? But I would say maybe about 20 million.
Wow. And if you could go back to the beginning, when you had no money, no success, no connections, how would you start today?
Well, actually, with no connections, first you got to look at, if you're talking about today, we're in a realm where we have social media. I tell people it's a choice that you make, right? You make a choice to look at things on whether it be Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever you're using. You make a choice to actually look at negative things, or you make a choice to look at positive things.
What books do you recommend that people read if they want to become successful?
That's a great question that you ask, you know what I mean? I always tell people there's one book, or it's so many books I can tell you about, right? But there's one book first that's called The Magic of Believing. You want to read that book by Claude Bristol. You want to read that book, Magic of Believing. Then there's another book that's called Think and Grow Rich. Yeah. You have to have that book with Napoleon Hill, right? Okay, because it's so key. And then there's another book that's called Why You Not Successful Now by Paige Fletcher. You want to read these books. Now, we can go on and on and on because I read every day. What the thing is about reading, I think people need to read at least 2 books a week. If you read 2 books a week, you think about what you're accomplishing in a year. So you got to jot down your goals. What are your goals? What are your direction? What are your purpose, right? So if you do that, it'll change your life. So those 3 books, Magic of Believing, Think and Grow Rich, and Why Are You Not Successful Now by Paige Fletcher, it's going to change your life.
Wow, that's absolutely great advice. Mia, if you could go back to when you were 15 years old and give yourself any piece of advice, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say to stop focusing on what men want and to stop spending your money on pointless things. Just save it. It's just not worth it, especially as a kid.
So, who are we here with today?
So my name is Eddie Surkin, and I'm an avid boater. I own a few boats, some in Los Angeles, some in Florida.
And what boats do you own?
I own a 60-foot yacht in Los Angeles, and I own a 50-foot yacht in Florida.
And if you could go back to when you're 18 years old and give yourself any piece of advice, what advice would you give?
When I was 18 years of age, they tried to draft me to go to Vietnam. I found a special program for the motion picture industry to become a special effect man. That meant working with your hands and with your head. I took it on to get out of the draft. Consequently, it gave me a career. I do believe people should concentrate more of what they can do with their hands and with their heads rather than just to go to college and waste their time. Learn a trait.
In what industry did you ultimately pursue a career in?
I ended up 55 years in the motion picture industry as a special effects man. I worked on technical things. I worked on movies like Jaws, King Kong, Return of the Jedi, and I was basically a mechanic who learned other traits in electronics.
What's the most amount of money you've ever made in a single year?
Going back to those years, I would make $300,000 or $400,000 a year.
So who are we here with today?
David Seal from the Yachts for Sale YouTube channel.
So if you could go back to when you were 18 years old and give yourself any piece of advice, what advice would you give yourself?
I think the best advice I was given at that age, I used to work with an entrepreneur, and on his desk he had a paperweight, and the paperweight said, just do it. Just do it. The advice being that if you have a good idea, don't hang around, get on with it and do it. You might not do it perfectly, it might not work, it might work, but if you don't do it, you'll never find out. So I think that's probably the advice that I would offer to my 18-year-old self and any other 18-year-olds.
So what industry did you ultimately pursue a career in?
I was very lucky. I fell into the yachting industry. I met an Italian girl. I fell in love with her in London, and on the Just Do It theme, I just did it. I just moved to Italy to pursue this girl. And while I was there, I heard of somebody who wanted to have English lessons, and it was a Mr. Norberto Ferretti, who's the founder of Ferretti Group, which is yacht builders. I saw the yachts. I thought, this is an amazing business to be in. And so I pursued that. I started off from giving him English lessons. He would then take me with him to speak to English-speaking clients. So he showed me one day the translation of the owner's manuals for his yachts. And they were written in Italian, translated to English, and the translation was terrible. And I burst out laughing. This was 1994. And he said, what are you laughing at? I said, well, you just can't understand the English. It's so bad. And he got quite offended. He said, do you think you could do better? I said, yeah, I could do better. He said, do you know how to use a computer? I said, yeah, I know how to use a computer. I'd never touched a computer in my life. Never. The next day, he put me in an office, and it's when the Mac computer first came out that you're probably too young to remember, but they were like box computers. Some were pink, some were green, some were blue. So he gave me one of those computers, and I just started writing the owner's instruction manuals for the yachts. So I got to learn about the yachts. I then worked into the sales office for him 10 years later, and then became a yacht broker, and from yacht brokerage got into YouTube.
Why did you end up getting into YouTube?
That's a great question. So first did a YouTube video. YouTube was new. This was going back to 2012. YouTube was a very new platform. I'd always wanted to be an actor as a kid. I noticed that the very few videos of yachts with just a little bit of music and a yacht, and then you go to the television and you have television shows where people are showing you a beautiful house or driving beautiful cars, and it was that human interaction. I thought, nobody's doing that. I should hire a camera team and show a super yacht. Did it, the yacht quickly got sold, but I was so stupid that I didn't make the connection that I should do more and more videos. So for 5 years, I think I produced 32 videos. Then the penny dropped that they were bringing in leads, and the following 5 years, I produced over 400 videos. And now I'm standing at well over 500 videos on the channel, almost 250,000 subscribers. To your point about it bringing in leads, sometimes I'll go a month or two and you don't get any leads. That's quite normal. But coming up to the boat show, I got 3 amazing leads in 3 days. 2 literally from billionaires who've been to the show, looked around yachts with us. One of them looks like he's going to make an offer on a yacht. That particular one brought his group of friends with him, who are all quite wealthy guys, all in their, I want to say, late 40s, early 50s. And they said to me, we sit around in the evening drinking beer watching your YouTube videos, and one of them wanted to buy a yacht, and they said, why don't we call this dude? And they all went, yeah, they were drinking beer, yeah, let's give him a call. So they called me, they came to the show, and they're actually real, really qualified buyers. And that's very satisfying when that happens.
Absolutely. What's the most amount that you've ever sold a yacht for?
Actually, the highest price of yacht that I personally sold was over $100 million. But the actual yacht was subject to, do you know what an NDA is?
Yeah, non-disclosure agreement.
So I'm not allowed to say what the yacht was, but that was an exciting day to sell that.
Why would someone who buys a yacht put it under an NDA?
It was the lawyer who was a very difficult individual, and he was creating a lot of problems. And in the end, you have to choose your battles, and we'd won in our commission agreements. We'd won the more important battles, and we just said, "Oh, let it go. It doesn't matter. We'll, do you know what I mean? It wasn't worth fighting."
If you could go back and start from scratch, how how would you approach becoming a yacht broker?
There's two things I would do very differently to how I did do them. First of all, I would learn the charter markets. So I only do sales of yachts. But if you can also offer charter services, you really develop a great group of loyal clients who come back to you every year for their vacation, for their charter, and who then eventually may buy. And the other thing, I should have kept every single email address, every single telephone number I'd ever been given, and worked it a lot more systematically than I did. I see young brokers now who are successful, and that's what they do.
Who are we here with?
This is Bob Dennison, and I'm with a really cool yachting company called Dennison Yachting. So Dennison Yachting so my grandparents a long time ago, back in 1948, they came to Fort Lauderdale on their honeymoon. They bought a shipyard, they started building yachts. Tragically, they sold the company in 1999, which happened to be the year I graduated college. We pivoted into yacht brokerage and charter, which is Dennison Yachting, and I am lucky enough to run that company today.
What industry did you ultimately pursue a career in?
Yachting.
So what's the most amount of revenue that the company's ever generated in a single year?
We have generated, revenue, somewhere around 20 million.
If you could go back and give any piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give?
My advice as an 18-year-old would be, actually, I got really bad advice when I was 18, which was, and I think a lot of 18-year-olds get this advice, which is find something you're passionate about and do that. I think that's horrible advice, and I think it does work for some people. I had somebody else give me advice that said, find something you're really good at and do that.
So the boat that we're on right now, how much does this boat cost?
This boat is about $6 million, and it is a very special boat. So it's like higher volume, so bigger ceilings. You and I are kind of tall guys. Sometimes on boats you kind of have to duck down or squeeze through a doorway. It's a very wide, big, tall boat. It's about $6 million, and it's a new marine built in Turkey, and they are by far like my favorite brand. They're awesome.
All right, so if you could go back to when you were 18 years old and give yourself any piece of advice, what advice would you give yourself?
Enjoy life. This is the first one. Do what you like to do and make it a job out of it, so it will never work.
And what industry did you ultimately pursue a career in?
In yachting, I am a boat builder in Italy for a shipyard called Wider, and we did a very nice career, very nice friends in the industry, and we never worked.
How much do you sell your boats for?
Starting from 10 ending to 80, 90 million.
What's the most expensive boat you've ever sold?
80 million.
If you could go back to the beginning of your career, would you do anything differently?
Frankly speaking, yes, there are a few mistakes that I've done, but they are really necessary to keep on fighting and learn. You know, you need a few gray hairs as well. You need the energy of a young boy and the gray hair of an experienced one. So I made all the steps. So far, I like my life.
What's the best financial decision that you've ever made?
Real estate. I do when I have some money, I buy something, and the money is there.
All right, so who are we here with?
My name's Todd Sawish. My wife, Barbie Sawish.
So if you could go back to when you were 18 years old and give yourself any piece of advice, what advice would you give?
You have to find something that you're passionate about, something that kind of just instills the value that you get up every day and it's not work. So I think it's difficult for people to figure that out today, and people are lost and they spend their whole lives trying to figure out what they want to do. So I think experiment with things as a teenager, expose yourself to as many things as possible, and then if you find it, then stick with it.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm an oral and maxillofacial surgeon, so I reconstruct people's mouths, faces, do a lot of facial plastic surgery, dental implants, wisdom teeth removal.
And are you a business owner?
I am. I own my own business.
And what's the name of your business?
South Florida Oral and Facial Surgery.
Wow. And what's the most amount of money you've ever made in a single year with your business?
Well, I have multiple offices with multiple associates that work for me. So, in that type of practice, you can make several million.
Wow, like above 10?
With one location, it would be difficult to do that. But if you have multiple locations, I think that's something easy that could be tackled.
If you could go back to when you're 18 years old and give yourself any piece of advice, what advice would you give?
Number one, don't get yourself in debt. People chase things. We're at a yacht show and you see these big things, but they don't have a solid base, meaning debt-free cash flow. Buy when you have cash flow coming in. Don't buy prior to that. People want to get into a house. They want to get into a car. I want the nice car. Wait, because if you wait and you build assets and create cash flow, you create freedom.
What would be the first asset that you would purchase?
Any type of real estate that you can get into, because if you want to get rich slowly, buy real estate. There is no get rich quick, especially now coming out today. There's been so much of that with crypto. In crypto, we saw what happened with that. Not saying it can't still continue to rise, but get into something that's an asset that you always know will go up in value, right? Inflation, everything's gone up in the last 2 or 3 years since COVID. Get into real estate, buy a piece of property.
So what industry industry did you ultimately pursue a career in?
I was in the hedge fund industry for a bit. I was in that for 7 years. I think as men, especially in kids coming out, 18-year-old boys turning into men, we struggle so much with an identity, and a lot of that ties to our career. And so I got into the hedge fund, but ultimately the auto industry, so I had dealerships. Now I have a dealership, built that for the last 10 years. But if I could go back, I would have focused simply on that, and then you're done way quicker, and it's focusing on one thing versus the shiny objects.
What's the blueprint to becoming a millionaire in today's society?
Finding something that you're good at, or deep diving into one thing, focusing and building whatever that business is. And then real estate. So find your cash cow, create the cash cow that's creating that cash flow, buy real estate, get the income. Don't invest in a Ferrari or a Porsche or a Vet now when you have the cash flow and the passive income, then you invest in that.
If you had to go back to when you were 18 years old, no money, no connections, no nothing, how would you start?
So one of a mentor of mine who is mentored not because I knew him, but because I listened to his cassettes, right? Cassettes. That's aging me, John.
Earl Nightingale.
It's great. Jim Rohn. He did The Art of Exceptional Living. Highly recommend. Jim Rohn mentored Tony Robbins. Tony couldn't afford to go to his events. Tony showed up and made it happen. And when he went to those events, you're around other like-minded people. That's how you build the network. It only takes one or two powerful connections to open your whole world up. So the fact you have no connections now, all it takes is clarity in how you're going to get there. And that is find a seminar, listen to books, go to a seminar, travel, meet these people, and you'll make the connections. Because these are like-minded people. When you get around other people like that, it only creates that synergy, right? Everybody's chasing that same thing.
So Gary, if you could go back to when you're 18 years old and give yourself any piece of advice, what advice would you give?
Yeah, it's not that serious. Keep working hard and outwork everyone else, and you always do well in life.
So what industry did you ultimately pursue a career in?
Boat sales, sales executive.
And what's the most expensive yacht that you've ever sold?
I would say 27 million euros.
What's the most amount of money you've ever made in a single year selling yachts?
Over 7 figures.
Had an incredible day at the boat show, Fort Lauderdale Boat Show. We spoke to some incredible people, and we got great advice. You know, one of the beautiful things about what we're able to do is we're able to get advice, capture it on camera, and then share it with you guys so you guys can benefit and also get the advice that we're soaking up out here. So yeah, we put in the groundwork today. We talked to over 50 people. We got rejected a ton, but you know, every time you get rejected, you just keep going. You know, it's not about how many times you fall down, but how many times you fall down and then you get back up. It was just a great day. I think the people in the yachting industry are some of the best people on earth. The saying is true, when you step on a yacht, you feel more relaxed. And when you hang out with yachting people, you feel more relaxed. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm here to help. I'm just getting started in this world, and you know, it's not easy. Just like so many of you out there, you're just getting started. You're trying to figure out what you want to do. You're trying to figure out where you want to go in life. And I'm no different than you. I'm just getting started myself. I'm just trying to figure everything out for myself. You might think that you have to have it all together. You might think you have to have it all figured out by the time you're 18, 19, 20. I've talked to some people who are 45, extremely successful with over $10 million in the bank account, and they're still figuring things out. That's because we're playing the game of life. This is a journey. Every day you're learning. Every day you're learning something new. And sometimes you win big and sometimes you lose big, but through every loss you got to bounce back and keep moving forward. So through watching these videos, you're able to learn from the collective experience and the collective body of knowledge that everyone we interview shares. So I just want to say thanks for watching the videos. Thanks for being a part of what we're building here, and I'm wishing you luck on your road to riches. See you later, future millionaire.